Hello, and welcome to the Mary Allen Neighbourhood Historical Walking Tour. My name is Doug Mulholland, and it's my pleasure to be your guide for this tour. The building that is now home to Marple's Restaurant was originally built as a livery stable for the Alexander House, a hotel that once stood on the corner. The hotel was built in the mid-1870s by David Kuntz, the owner of the Kuntz Brewery, which was on the diagonally opposite corner of King and William Streets. The hotel was torn down in the 1930s, but the livery stable continued to be used as an automobile service station. Notice the wide entranceway to allow for a horse and buggy. This small park area, known as Heritage Park, along with the portion on the other side of King Street, was originally a public square in 1855 and the first market area for Waterloo. Just behind Heritage Park, away from King Street, at 156 King Street South, is the yellow-bricked Kuntz Eckert House, and on the west side of King Street, at 167 King Street South, is the Kuntz Labatt House. These homes are a few of the only reminders of the brewery that once stood on the southwest corner of King and William Street. The house at 156 King Street South is a good example of a merchant's home built around 1880, and across the street there were three impressive homes built by Kuntz for family members. 167 King Street South is the only one of the three that remains. Colonel Hugh J. Heasley, manager of Carling's, lived in the house until 1978. Labatt's had the home designated as a historical site in 1978. The next stop will be in front of the large green and white house at 172 King Street South. 172 King Street South is known as the Erb Kumpf House. Abraham Erb built the original portion of the house in 1812. He came to Waterloo from Pennsylvania with a group of Mennonites and established a sawmill and a grist mill. The house is a mixture of styles and is presently a lawyer's office. Notice the two-story veranda, the lattice work, the barge board, and the wings on either side of the entrance. The east section of the central part was the original house, and the front door faced the town. The house was designated as a historic property in 1979. 12 George Street is a house that was built in 1907 in the Victorian style. The two-story veranda, tower, and stained glass windows add charm to the house. 28 George Street was actually built as servants' quarters around 1860 for John Hoffman, who lived on the corner at that time. However, there was no corner, and George Street had not been built yet. The area bounded by King, George, Willow, and John Streets was an orchard owned by Mr. Hoffman. The house was built in the Gothic style with an arched door in the gable, rather than the usual window. The house at 39 George Street was built between 1903 and 1906 for Alfred Snyder, whose father Simon Snyder lived next door at 43 George Street. Alfred and his brother Herbert organized the firm of Snyder's Limited Upholstering in 1903. They manufactured living room suites and developed the first sofa that was completely safe from moths. This house is very interesting as it is almost the exact mirror image of his brother's house at 50 Albert Street. Both are unique for their poured concrete design. Both cost $7,000 and had the same mason and carpenter. Note the Palladian and bay windows and wraparound porch. Next door, on the southwest corner of George and Herbert Streets, is 43 George Street. This house was built around 1875 for Simon Snyder, who was mayor of Waterloo, a druggist, and later worked in the furniture company. The house has had different additions over the years and still maintains its servant buzzer under the dining room carpet. Note the front porch and stucco exterior. The house was originally yellow brick. On the southeast corner of George and Herbert Streets is 49 George Street. This house was originally built in 1886 for Julius Germain, who owned and operated a harness and saddle shop. German decided to change his career and purchased the Market Hotel in 1889 for $8,500, moved his family into the hotel, and sold this house to Levi Stauffer in 1901. Stauffer grew up on the family farm near the present-day corner of Erb Street and Fisher-Hallman Road. He founded the North Waterloo Farmers Mutual Fire Insurance Company and was the first president. He was also very influential in the early United Brethren Church. Of special note are the shutters, the brackets under the eaves, and the keystone in the arch above the windows in this Italianate house. 59 George Street is a house that was built in 1886 for Paul Peganeau, a jeweler and clockmaker. The house became known as Chestnut Hill because of the chestnut trees that were planted on the property. William Green came north from the United States and bought the home in 1903 for $2,200. A depression in the market led to the closure of his factory in 1913, and Green returned to New Jersey. The house is Italianate with Queen Anne influences. Next door, but set back a little further from the street, is 65 George Street. This home was built around 1909, and at one time it had a wraparound porch. It is stucco over red brick with 3 bricks thickness. Notice the side lights around the front door. This was the residence of William Reed, a barrister and later a judge in Waterloo. His son John Collingwood Reed was a well-known broadcast commentator. This was also one of the last houses within the city boundaries to still have ponies, and they built a barn onto the back of their garage. Next door again is 73 George Street, the Bean, Wright, Hillrest house. Theodore Bellinger was a merchant and a town councillor and had this house built in 1882. Bellinger's widow sold the house to David Bean in 1900. Bean was the owner of the Waterloo Chronicle, a town councillor, and mayor of Waterloo. This house was later owned by Dr. Doug Wright, who was president of the University of Waterloo from July 1981 to April 1990. The porch was recently rebuilt, and notice the keystones with a rare grape motif, the brackets and wood trim under the eaves, the rounded windows in the attic level, and the double front door. The house was designated as a historic property in 1982. St. Louis School was built in 1905 as a 4-room schoolhouse and eventually closed its doors in 1983. The School Sisters of Notre Dame residence was built in 1895. The sisters started teaching in the basement of the church until the school was built. St. Louis Roman Catholic Church is the oldest of the buildings here and was built in 1890. Notice the steeple and brickwork. The rectory was built in 1928 in what is known as the period revival style, as it has medieval influences. Be sure to look for the loopholes in the gables of the rectory. Loopholes are found in medieval architecture as a place for launching arrows. 47 Allen Street is a house that was built in 1886 for Clayton Wells, a dentist and very outgoing citizen in Waterloo. He and his father, who was also a dentist, had their practice on King Street. In the early 1900s, the house was used as a rectory for St. Louis Roman Catholic Church. Notice the restored wooden porch trim and the turned spindles. The next red brick building on the left is 41 Allen Street. This was the residence of Menno S. Hallman and was built around 1902. Hallman was a teacher and worked for the Waterloo Chronicle. Later he joined the J.B. Snyder Furniture Company, which eventually became Snyder Brothers Furniture. He became an accountant, then office manager for the company, and eventually an actuary for Mutual Life. The house is in the Edwardian style, but the main front window and front gable show Queen Anne influences. 2 doors further along, at 33 Allen Street, is the Church of the Holy Savior. This church was built in 1897, but unlike St. Louis Roman Catholic Church, this was a church where services were held in English rather than German. The parish hall was erected in 1912 in memory of Mrs. Stephanie Seagram, and in 1928 this family also erected the square tower, donated an organ, and redecorated the church interior. The church contains carvings by local craftsmen from the Globe Furniture Company, which was located in the area of what is now Father David Bauer Drive and Herb Street. Globe Furniture specialized in church and school furniture, along with artistic wood carvings. 222 Mary Street is known as the Rickber House, an attractive board and batten house built in 1859 for Peter Shavio. Small arches neatly connect the battens. This home was designated as a historic property in 1986. The board and batten style is very rare in Waterloo, and this is one of the few remaining houses constructed in that style. 31 Union Street, known as the Seagram Bauer House, was built for Thomas Seagram in 1913, the same year that he was married. Seagram was the son of distilling magnate Joseph Seagram, and Thomas, along with his brothers, played prominent roles in the expansion of the company. In 1967, Raymond Bauer and his family bought the house. He was the grandson of Aloysius Bauer, who founded Bauer Industries, and the brother of Bobby and Father David Bauer of hockey fame. He went on to become president of Bauer Industries a few years later. The plant found long-term prosperity as a major automotive parts supplier. Only 2 different families have lived in this house, a rare feat given that it was built in 1913. The house is best described as being in the style of an English manor house. 251 Mary Street is a somewhat unusual-looking house because we're actually viewing the back of it. The Calhoun family built the house in the 1870s, and the builders never expected that Mary Street would be built where it is. The house faced King Street, and at one time had a lot of property with an orchard on one side and the barn on the other. 227 King Street South was the head office of the Mutual Life Assurance Company that was built here in 1912. Before that, the company was located in what is now the police building at Urban Albert Streets. Mutual Life spared no expense with terracotta imported from England and grand carvings. Notice the columns, stone carvings, and wrought iron fence. This extraordinary building was designated as a historic property in 1979, and in 1987 the office tower was built. Looking back across the street, in the northeast corner of the Mutual Life property, is the house at 217 King Street South. This house was built for George Wegenaw in 1911 by an employee of the architects who designed the Mutual Life head office. George started at Mutual as a clerk cashier and eventually worked his way up to the position of general manager and then managing director in 1907. He supervised the move to this site and remarked that they would never fill the whole building. There have been a few small changes to the house over the years, and it's now owned by Sun Life and his apartments. Notice especially the decorative gables in this Queen Anne style house. One door north of John Street, the buildings at 205 and 203 King Street South were originally built as houses in 1849 and were attached in 1973. 203 is a 1.5-story Georgian-style home and was once owned by Mr. Kuntz, who started the brewery nearby. 205 is a frame structure built along the lines of a barn, and at one time had a center door with a window in each side. It used to be owned by the Bauer. 188 King Street South is a house that was built in the Georgian Revival style in the early 1930s. Don't miss the distinctive quarter-circle windows at the attic level on both ends. Originally the property was owned by the Bauers, and Dr. Harry McNally, a physician and surgeon, purchased the property, built the house, and had his practice in the far right extension. On the west side of King Street is 187 King Street South, the former Bauer Industries factory. Aloysius Bauer started out in 1888 to operate a carriage business, and then moved on to a cotton upholstering plant, which eventually led to, among other things, acoustical thermal products for the automotive industry. The next use of the building is for industrial-style lofts, street front stores, and market. On the southeast corner of King and Allen Streets is 186 King Street South and 189 Mary Street, currently the Kitchener-Waterloo branch of the Canadian Red Cross. Magdalena Bauer, wife of Aloysius, bought land at a public auction in 1894 for $1,625. Within a year, 2 houses were built on the property, the one just around on Mary Street and this one, which is similar in appearance. Their son Edgar, however, would be the first Bauer to live in either one. He and his family lived at 189 Mary Street first, and then moved here. In the 1960s, it was home to the YWCA. The house is in the Queen Anne style, and the back veranda has been filled in. 181 King Street South is the home of the Brick Brewery. I started the brewery back in 1984 simply because I love beer, said Jim Brickman, founder of the Brick Brewing Company Limited. After 5 years of feasibility studies, research, and finding capital, Jim was able to obtain a brewer's license and purchased this 3-story building. The century-old former furniture factory has now been converted into a traditional European brew house. You can go inside to see the collection of beer bottles from around the world. Next door, at 179 King Street South, in what is now the Brick Brewery office, is a house that was built around 1859 for Isaac Weaver. There have been many changes and renovations over the years, but the house still maintains a pleasing, balanced appearance with an attractive arched doorway and a rare stone chimney. Notice also the small paned 6/6 windows and the dormers on the roof. It's been my pleasure to be your guide today, and I hope you've enjoyed the tour. If you haven't already done so, you might want to try the other tour in this series, the Uptown Waterloo Historical Walking Tour. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this tour, and a special word of thanks also goes to the many people who helped to make it possible, including the property owners and the Ontario Ministry of Culture for helping to fund the production of the tour. Have a great day here in Waterloo.